Hello and welcome back to the PSD to HTML flat design build. We finished up everything except for our footer section, which we can now see in our Photoshop file. And we have a 3-column setup here that we've created. And as you can see, this is a pretty simple setup, so it shouldn't take too long to get everything taken care of. And the first thing I want to take care of is the 3-column setup itself. And then as we move forward, we'll take care of the styling of the items within those columns. So if we go back into TextMate and take a look at our HTML file, I've moved everything into a new folder. So all of our changes in this lesson will be saved in the Site 18 folder. And I'm going to scroll down to the footer section near the bottom. And here's our footer. So our footer has 3 columns in it, and we gave each div a class. Let me click outside here, there we go. Each div has a class of column 1/3. So we have a 1/3 column here, here, and here. And our third column here, remember we gave a class of column registration, because we're going to style that one a little bit differently. We're going to change the color of the text inside of it, we're going to change the background color of it, and it's also going to have a registration form in it. So in this lesson, we're going to start with our column 1/3 class. So we're going to go to main.css, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to create a new section. Let's skip a couple lines. We'll create a new section for our footer. So again, we're just using a line of comment here to mark off this new section so it's easy to find. And first of all, let's create a rule for the footer element. This is not for a class or an ID. This is for the footer element itself. I'm going to give it a background color of ED, which is a light gray color. And then we'll go ahead and give it a width of 100%. And remember, this footer is contained within the main content section, and that main content section closes off after the closing footer tag there. So when we say 100%, it's not going to be 100% of the browser width, it's going to be 100% of that section. So let's go back to our CSS and let's just save that and go back to our browser. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see what the footer looks like before making any changes to it. So now let's refresh it, and we can see it now has that background color on it, and that looks good. So now let's define our columns. We'll go back into our code, and if you remember, we created a class for our columns of column-1-3rd, and inside that column 1/3, we'll define how these columns are going to work. They're going to float to the left, and we're going to give them a width of 33.333%. So before we move forward, let's go ahead and save that, go back to our browser and refresh, and we can already see that we have our 3 columns set up, but we're not quite there yet. First of all, you'll notice that we just lost our background color. Our new background color for this footer is now gone because all of the items within it are now floating. And if you've been doing web design for any amount of time at all, then you've definitely encountered this problem before, where your background collapses if everything inside that element is floating. And the way we can fix that is by using the clear fix hack. And you can just do a search for that CSS clear fix in Google, and the first search result that you'll come to, hopefully, is this hack right here. And this is just a little bit of CSS code that you would add to your CSS file. And then the item that needs to be cleared, the item that contains the floated elements, the item that has a background that's disappearing on you, needs to also have a class of clearfix applied to it. So if we just highlight all of this code here, copy it, and then let's jump back into our CSS, and I'm going to come to the very bottom here and create another section for this clearfix. So we'll comment that line off so that we can easily navigate through our file, and then we'll paste all of the clearfix code here. So again, in order to get this clearfix to work, we need to give our footer a class of clearfix. And there's one thing I'm going to change in this code. I'm going to get rid of this period. This is the content. We've talked about this content property before. Instead of putting a period there, I'm going to change that to just a space, because spaces aren't rendered. Sometimes if you put a period there, it will add some extra space around the element that's clear fixed or after that element. And we don't want that extra space there. So I'm going to get rid of that period and put a space instead. And that should take care of that problem. So let's save our main.css file, jump back to index.html, and we need to add a class of clearfix to our footer. So for our footer element, we're going to put space, class equals, and then clearfix, all one word. And again, if you're confused about what element to apply that class to, it's going to be the parent of the elements that are floating. So this div with a class of column 1/3, all of these column 1/3 classes are floated to the left, and it's that float which makes the background of the parent element disappear. So you can think of it one of two ways. You're either applying this clearfix class to the parent of the floated elements, or you could also think of it as applying that class of clearfix to the element whose background has suddenly disappeared. So let's save that index.html file and let's see if that worked. We'll go back to our browser, go to our page here, refresh, and now we can see our background is now where we need it to be. So one of the first things you might notice is the from the blog text is up against the left edge, so we need to add some padding to these columns. And remember, if you add padding to a column, by default the column is going to get wider. And we don't want these columns to get any wider, otherwise they'll show up on new lines instead of all horizontally right next to each other. So after we add our padding, we also need to set the box sizing property to border box. So we'll go back into our code, jump to our CSS file, and we'll scroll back up to our footer section. And for the column 1/3 class, we're going to add 20 pixels of padding. And then because that's going to increase the width, we can undo that width increase by setting the box sizing property to border-box. So save that, jump back into our browser and refresh. There we go. Now we have a little bit of extra padding in there, so that should be easier to work with. So now that we've got our 3 column setup finished, we can jump in the next video and start styling the items within this 3 column setup. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.